Famously marketed as central heating for kids, it looks and tastes like hot sick in a bowl. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Business Blaze. This one, 7 and a bit famous brands that are now Chinese. Now, I came up with this idea because I was like, wow, Volvo was bought by the Chinese? That's crazy, they're so Swedish, but now they're Chinese. And Danny was like, Simon, I tried writing this one, it was pretty boring. And I was like, Danny, write the script! And he did. It wasn't quite like that, but I was just like, press on, Danny, I'm interested. So if this one's boring, you can blame me. Stay tuned, maybe it won't be. There are so many Western brands and products that wear their heritage on their sleeves with as much fierce pride as a devoted football fan might wear a tattoo of his home team's colours all across his back or across his face. That's true, like facial tattoos. This became surprisingly popular. It's like, do you not like being employed? Simon's still making fun of people with tattoos on their faces. Jesus Christ. My life. I live in a small village in Cornwall in the UK. Not me, Danny. And many of the shops and cafes and restaurants here focus heavily on the local angle to draw in the tourists. A quick walk around the village will dish up temptations to buy Cornish pasties and Cornish clotted cream, which you can wash down with a tankard of real Cornish cider, all 100% produced within the heart of Cornwall. The cider sounds pretty good. I'm not a big fan of pasties. But I mean, the last thing I really want in England is local food. It's like, 1, I mean, do you not have pizza? And 2, if I want to eat strawberries in November, or I need those to be brought in from abroad by plane in wrapped in plastic. I had a pomelo last week. It's January, and I'm like, this is incredible. Oh, it's great to live in the future. Bearing all that in mind, you couldn't help but feel a bit confused, or perhaps even a bit conned, if it turned out that some of those local shops were actually owned by Chinese companies. I should stress, right from the start, that they're not. I mean, come on, that would be absolutely ridiculous, wouldn't it? But big Chinese firms have been acquiring more and more Western brands over the last few years, and you might be just surprised to discover just how many of your favorite homegrown traditional products and services are now, in fact, Chinese properties. So a typical spending spree down your local high street in the Western world could end up with far more money getting pumped into the Chinese economy than we ever imagined. Here's a rundown of 7 of the biggest brands that you never knew were Chinese, except for Volvo, which is the first one, which I feel like I knew this. I'm not exactly an expert on Chinese company acquisition. Also, I feel this is interesting. I'm not sure if Danny is going to mention this, but just because the fact of China being a centralized economy and like how the company loan system works there, whereas if you're like a company that's got an in with a Chinese government, they'll just like give you a ton of money, like to the extent of just purchasing another company. So it is fascinating how these companies are being afforded by basically a state-run economy. Anyway, Volvo. Over 100 years ago, the name Volvo was first registered as a trademark in Sweden, although back then Volvo was a subsidiary of the Bearing and Seal Company, SFK, and the name was originally just intended to be used for an exciting new range of ball bearings. The only time ball bearings have been exciting was it a Nicolas Cage movie? I swear there's like a school bus flying through the air, some dude sets off an explosion with like ball bearings, and they go everywhere, and there's an awesome like slow motion shot. I'd love to watch. Is it Gone in 60 Seconds? It wasn't until 1924 that Volvo produced their first car, which was specifically designed to withstand the tough climate and rough roadways of Sweden. Since then, the company built up a reputation for exporting sturdy, solid, and reassuringly reliable automobiles, which are perfect for driving across the epic, rugged Swedish landscape, but are still probably more likely to get used to quick shopping trips and school runs. Yeah, it's like, I have a 4x4. I live in a city. I need a 4x4. Sure. I didn't just get it because my wife likes being higher up when she's driving. Sold to the American Ford Company in 1999, there was a natural concern when it was first announced in 2010 that Volvo was to be bought out by China's 36th favorite car company. There are 36 car companies in China? The Geely Group had a reputation in China for knocking out cheap and cheerful cars that didn't always work, and cynics predicted that the Volvo brand was about to become dramatically diluted by the inevitable launch of low-grade cars with bits falling off them. It's true, I was in China a couple of years ago, and you wander around and it's like, there's the occasional BMW or Mercedes or like, VW or whatever. Most of the car brands, I'm like, don't know that one. However, I also feel the same way in America, like Chrysler and stuff, you just don't see really in Europe. Oh, you see some Chryslers, I guess. But generally, the car brands are really different, other than Ford. Ford is everywhere. Also, when I was in China, they have like fake cars. I mean, not really fake cars, But there was like, I think it was it was a car that looked really, really similar to the Jaguar E-Pace, except I believe it was called a Leopard. But in fact, the $1 billion buyout has proved to be an incredible success, which has seen the expansion of assembly factories and development centers across Sweden and China, and the introduction of a fleet of new luxurious vehicles. In fact, I recently drove one of Volvo's new cars. That thing basically drives itself. Like, I was driven a Tesla like a couple of years before with the full autopilot and stuff, and I was fairly impressed by this. And then I went in this Volvo, which doesn't even advertise. You know, Tesla, I feel like they're always banging on about autopilot. I was riding in this Volvo, and I was like, this is pretty much the same. It's quite incredible. And it also doesn't have to run on electricity, which, you know, makes life easier. For me, not for the environment. It's horrible for the environment. It's just easier to, you know, you just go and you fill it up and you're done. In fact, Håkan Samuelsson, the Swedish CEO of the Volvo Group, claims the Volvo was close to being dead in 2010 and believes that the Chinese buyout saved the company. Imagine what China's 35th favorite car company might have been able to do with it. Ba-da-bum-bum. I feel these ba-da-bum-bum less effective now that I have this mic above me, because then the sound, it doesn't travel with me. Like if I wander over here, you probably can't hear me as good. Whereas if I was using a lapel mic, you can really feel the Superdrug. Are you Americans familiar with Superdrug? Superdrug is like, it's not a pharmacy. It's like a drugstore, I think. Like you can't buy drugs in there, but you can buy like deodorants and you could get paracetamol, but they won't give you a prescription, for example. Is paracetamol even a drug in the US? I think you call it like Paralan or Paralol or something like that. Like it's a brand name. Paracetamol is the drug that makes up the brands. I'm gonna stop talking. The first Superdrug health and beauty store opened in London in 1964, and over the years, it became a staple of British high street shopping. For most of its lifespan, the chain kind of modeled itself as a cut-price version of Boots. Boots is like another, I think Boots is more international, right? It's like a pharmacy, drugstore sort of thing. Growing up in the UK in the 80s and 90s, I can remember that the posh kids on the other side of town would visit Boots for their Reed diffusers and pedicure kits, while the rest of us would pop into Superdrug for our cheap deodorants and incontinence pads. In the mid-90s, the chain underwent a dramatic rebranding to try and appear a bit more upmarket and steal some customer away from Boots, who were still very much top of the health and beauty tree. They adopted the catchy new slogan, "The real beauty is the price." Wait, they wanted to appeal to a more upmarket audience? How are we going to appeal to more rich people, guys? Well, let's advertise our low prices. This sounded cool, but coincided with the surprising rise in price of all their products, so it didn't really work. Yeah, this fails on like every level, Superdrug. Suddenly it became difficult to see who Superdrug were meant to be targeting. They still seemed to be marketing themselves as a low-cost alternative to Boots, but the price hikes were still driving bargain hunters away to other emerging discount chains. The floundering business was eventually snapped up by the Hong Kong company CK Hutchinson Holdings in 2002, and recent years have seen Superdrug close the gap with Boots by targeting a younger demographic, through a strong online presence and regular endorsements from social media influencers. And speaking of that, this video is brought to you by Seuss, not really, but Superdrug. If you ever want someone to, you know, do a little plug for your dome wax, reach out. Dome wax. Surprisingly expensive for a discount store. They still don't always get it right though. In 2007, the launch of a novelty man-made punching bag for women wasn't a major hit with consumers or domestic violence campaigners. Yeah, no, that's a misstep. Smithfield Foods. Never heard of this one. You can't get much more American than Smithfield Foods, no. Apparently, yeah, Danny's never heard of it either. Good. I'll be honest, I wasn't massively familiar with the pork processing company founded in Virginia in 1936, but I'm led to believe that the Smithfield's holiday ham is an iconic American holiday tradition. If it is, let us know in the comments below. In much the same way that Bernard Matthews' turkey drumsticks and drunken pub brawls are a long-standing Christmas tradition here in the UK. I've heard of Bernard Matthews. I thought they make like processed meat slices. I'd never heard of their turkey drumsticks, which actually sound a lot nicer than the processed meat that they make, which is not nice. Legend has it that Smithfield produces its ham using a curing process that settlers learned from the Native Americans about 500 years ago. It's not the only thing they took from them, is it? It's estimated that Smithfield... That's not funny. It's really not funny. Kind of inappropriate. Welcome to Business Blaze. It's estimated that Smithfield produces around 6 billion pounds of American pork every year, along with 4.7 billion gallons of good old-fashioned American manure. Well, I guess if you're raising the pigs anyway, you may as well. It's like, what do you make? Well, we make, like, fertilizer, and then we kill all the things that make the fertilizer and eat them. It's a beautiful cycle, and we stole the recipe from the natives. Except that nowadays it's technically Chinese pork, as the company was... That sounds more delicious. Chinese pork. As the company was acquired by Shanghai Group, now known as WH Group in... Oh, sorry, Shuanghai. Group, known as WH Group in 2013. By the way, I'm making zero effort with pronunciations in this video, or really any Business Blaze video, because I don't care. It was bought in 2013 for a sizzling $4.72 billion in the biggest Chinese takeover of a US company in history. The deal also included 146,000 acres of land, which makes WH Group one of the biggest international owners of American farmland. However, the average consumer is unlikely to notice any difference, as the porky produce is still very much rooted in US soil. And despite conspiracy theories and wild rumors, the pigs aren't exported to China for processing and then imported back into America for consumption. Yeah, that would be insane. Largely because that would be logistically ridiculous. Yes, agreed. It'd be like some giant pig cruise ships just floating over to China. It's like, oh, where are we going? China. It's not good, is it, boys? And also, on that cruise, they'd definitely be throwing all the furniture off the ship. If you got that joke, thank you for being a regular Business Blaze subscriber. If you didn't, you need to watch more Business Blaze, and always watch these videos to the end because I like watch time and also money. London taxis. I was quite intrigued by this one, as some of the manic press headlines at the time seemed to suggest that Chinese companies had taken over every taxi fleet in London and were now charging taxi fares in yuan. Of course, it isn't quite like that. Okay, it's nothing remotely like that. Is that the second time we've done this in this video? It's like, here's a great analogy that's not true. Thanks, Danny. The London Taxi Company designs and manufactures the black cabs, or hackney carriages, that are destined for the streets of London, although slightly misleadingly, the company isn't even based in London. Betrayal! It's based in Coventry. This is terrible. Like, my geography is terrible. I'm not really sure where Coventry is. Like, anything, we have this thing in the UK where it's like, there's this place called Watford. And you kind of say, like, if you're from the south, anything above Watford is north. And if you've got the UK like this, and the south down here, this is the bottom. Like, Watford's like here. My knowledge of geography above here is basically non-existent. I shouldn't admit this, it's kind of embarrassing. I've never been to Coventry. After over 50 years of triumphant taxi production, the wheels were coming off. Honestly, Coventry could be in the southwest, and I still wouldn't know. Hey Siri, where's Coventry? Hey Siri, where's Coventry, for f***'s sake?
Here's what I found on the web.
Okay. After over 50 years of triumphant taxi production, the wheels were coming off by 2012, and the business was stalling at the brink of administration until it was snapped up by a Chinese company for £11.4 million. Pounds. That's cheap. I mean, for a London taxi making company, it seems like that's not a lot of money. Now rebranded as the London Electric Vehicle Company, the new outfit is aiming to produce thousands of shiny new electric cabs over the coming years to bring the streets of old London town into the 21st century. They've just very recently opened a brand new £300 million production plant in London or China. No, they're sticking with Coventry, which apparently is near Birmingham. Look that up. But who was the Chinese buyer? It was none other than our old friends the Geely Group again. China's 36th favorite car company. I'd have no... Is it Geely or Geely? Who cares? Not content with taking over Volvo and London taxis, the Geely Group also acquired a 51% controlling stake in the British car manufacturer Lotus in 2017, and a year later became the largest single shareholder in the German car manufacturer Daimler, the producers of Mercedes-Benz. I had no idea. That's incredible. So Mercedes-Benz, parent company, is owned by a Chinese car company. Rotary watches. The Swiss have a world-leading reputation when it comes to exporting army knives, chocolate, and cheese. They're also pretty famous for their exquisite timepieces too. Rotary Watches was established as a small business in Switzerland in 1895, but sales really began to take off in the 1920s when they started importing their watches to the UK. By the 1940s, Rotary had become the official supplier of watches to the British Army, which meant just about every household in the UK had one of them following the end of the Second World War. The head office of Rotary Watches was eventually relocated to the UK, but the company is now confusingly wholly owned by a Chinese investment holding company called City Champ Watch and Jewelry Group. Let's not rename Rotary City Champ Watch and Jewelry Group. Can you imagine a watch that says like City Champ? It sounds cheap. So it's now effectively a Chinese company producing watches in Switzerland for a UK market. The next logical step in this long-running business story would probably be to move the head office to Kuala Lumpur. American Multi-Cinema, that's AMC, and lots of US movies. American Multi-Cinema, or AMC, is about to celebrate 100 years of serving up popcorn and screening the latest blockbusters to US audiences. From 1920s cinematic masterpiece Nosferatu, never heard of it, right through to modern-day classics such as Pokemon, Detective Pikachu. Hell no. AMC was acquired by the Chinese conglomerate Dalian Wonder Group in 2012 for $2.6 billion, and shortly afterwards AMC swallowed up Odeon Cinemas, I know that one, that's big in the UK, UCI Cinemas, and Calm-like Cinemas to become the largest cinema chain in the world. Although Dalian Wonder still own an interest in AMC today, they sold a major stake of the company in 2018, but that's not because they were getting a bit bored of American movies, they just wanted to focus more on making the movies rather than showing them. This is true, the number of times like I go to the movie theater now, and you sit down and they play like the whatever plays where it shows like the tree getting struck by lightning or whatever, you know, those things. Like the number of times it's like, whoa, this was made by like Alibaba. So that's crazy. I mean, it's not crazy, it's completely expected, but super interesting. In 2016, Dalian Wonder bought the American movie production company Legendary Entertainment, that's one of the ones that you see at the beginning, for $3.5 billion, which is the biggest ever Chinese acquisition of a US media company. Since then, the company has produced fresh installments of long-running film franchises such as Kong, Jurassic World, Mamma Mia, and Godzilla. And look, China, if you want to acquire my media franchise, I'll make fun of you less. That's my journalistic integrity. And yes, the Chinese-owned American film company is the genius creative force behind the latest film inspired by the Japanese media franchise Pokemon. Alrighty. Weetabix. Finally, this one's cheating a bit as it's no longer owned by a Chinese company, but it was for a while. For the best part of 100 years, the kids of Britain have enjoyed waking up to a bowl of Weetabix. It could be argued that the breakfast cereal is nothing much more than oversized baby rusks which go all limp and soggy in the bowl of milk within a couple of minutes. They do, but they are good, like a couple of Weetabix, milk, some brown sugar on top. That's exceptionally good. So they're good enough for the Queen of England, they're good enough for us. Damn Skippy. In fact, Weetabix is one of the incredibly rare products that have been granted a second separate royal warrant from the Prince of Wales, as well as your bog standard warrant from the Queen. Founded in England in 1932, the Weetabix Limited Company didn't just make Weetabix, they also made Ready Brek, famously marketed as central heating for kids. It looks and tastes like hot sick in a bowl. I used to like Ready Brek as a kid, but I get that, Danny. Alpen, a muesli rabbit food cereal, which they clearly ripped off from the Swiss, true, and several other breakfast cereals, which are all exported around the world. The British company was effectively bought out by the Chinese government in 2012 when it was acquired by the state-run Bright Food Company, under whose control it has remained for 5 years. What? I'm sure this was just a business decision, but it's like, what should we buy, guys? Let's buy that weird British cereal that goes soggy. Do Chinese people even eat cereal for breakfast? I'm betting they don't. I think they have dumplings, right? Chinese people, let me know. Oh yeah, you can't say, well, Chinese people who don't live in China, because I don't think you can get YouTube in China. It turns out though that Weetabix isn't even British anyway. Really? It was actually developed in Australia in the 1920s under the name Weetabix, which is still going strong today. Who knew? But whatever the origins of the soggy mush itself, the Chinese relinquished control of the thoroughly British Weetabix company in 2017. It's now owned by the American company Post Holdings. So you guys were like, we'll take that weird breakfast cereal off the Chinese, who took it off the British, who took it off the Australians. Apparently there's huge corporate demand for Weetabix. This has been Business Blaze. That script was written by Danny. Thank you, Danny. Like, subscribe, dislike if you disliked something in this video, that's cool too. And I'll see you next time.